So I've wanted to do a video about Anarcho-Tyranny for some time. I just kind of remembered it the other day when I was talking about how centrists make a double prohibition, where they allow themselves, even in a subconscious sense, to hold free speech and their own Western values sacred, while subjecting social justice to deconstruction and mockery, and don't get the cognitive dissonance of pissing on believing in things and then asserting your beliefs in purity constantly. That brought back to mind the paleo-conservative / modern alt-right reclaimed concepts. Excuse me, the modern alt-right reclaimed concept of anarcho-tyranny, which is something that they got from an early 90s paleo-conservative, think like Pat Buchanan type, who later, just like Pat Buchanan himself, went full race realist. And you'll hear Braving Ruin, outline what exactly the idea of anarcho-tyranny is. It also brought to mind the weird way, the oxymoron that plays out when a lot of alt-righters don't want to call themselves fascist all the way, and how a lot of them still have like their vestigial tail from the libertarian movement, the Ron Paul libertarian movement that kind of was the precursor to the Tea Party and then the alt-right. The alt-right is basically Tea Partiers who realized that the reason they were really into small government is because they wanted someone to get out of the way so that they could be racist. And I guess it's more honest than the Tea Party movement, and that the Tea Party movement was very reliant on very obvious dog whistles. The alt-right is more explicit in their racism, but they use dog whistles for other things that they feel they still need to keep concealed from normies who would happen to discover the movement and can't take the heavy stuff right out the gate. So anarcho-tyranny is a really sort of upside down concept. Oh, what I was going to say was I see a lot of these fucking alt-righters identify themselves by weird political identities that don't belong together. So you'll see a lot of them that, because they were Ron Paulers, identify as, libertarian fascists or libertarian nationalists, which is putting together a libertarian and authoritarian system. And what I take from that is the same thing that I take away from anarcho-tyranny, which is I want absolute freedom for myself. I want to be able to stockpile as many military weapons as I want. I want to be able to engage in whatever kind of hate speech I want. I want to be able to burn crosses and swastikas, and I want the lives of my political enemies to be micromanaged. I want them to be imprisoned and punished and tortured for the most minor infraction. The alt-right, and this is very similar to criticisms I used to make of the Tea Party, which is the Tea Party wanted socialism for rich people. They wanted collectivism for the John Galt billionaire type. They wanted rich people to be able to organize, and they wanted to make it absolutely impossible for anyone below a certain economic class to join a labor union or engage in sort of any sort of collectivization themselves. So it's the same thing again, except this time we're talking about what kind of police state they want. They want a police state that leaves white people alone just enough so that they can get everything that they want, from segregation to some of them advocate for slavery, the restoration of race-based slavery. And then they want that same government to be brutally authoritarian against their political enemies, which the alt-right is a bible of people, from single women who are white to black women to black trans women to regular, run-of-the-mill vanilla cis gays. You know, the ever-expanding enemy list of fascism is legendary, and it's because the system that's built upon deflecting legitimate concerns by feeding people's anxiety infinite exterior threats. And when you run out of exterior threats, you start to claim subversion, that something inside of the power structure is a threat to the people. And again, that's an authoritarian thing, because Stalinists and Leninists are sort of the same position, that they sort of present all these paranoid theories about how they're being undermined from within and without. But I digress. Anarcho-Tyranny is just kind of more of this, like, this assertion of privilege, this idea that you know, I don't want for you, you know, it's like an anti-egalitarian argument, the idea that some people deserve. So example, Braving Ruin in this video mentions that the reason that you had the Parkland shooter in Florida is because the police department, and we've heard this brought up regarding Muslim rape gangs in Europe, even though it hasn't been substantiated, that the police are being politically correct and deliberately virtue signaling via non-enforcement of the laws, and not arresting black or racial minority students, ethnic minority students, who are engaging in crimes against the white majority, which is, again, it's not substantiated. And you know, when people sort of when people ask me about, like, oh well, you know, don't they recognize you know, people make assumptions when they hear stuff like this, that right-wingers don't understand their own hypocrisy. The liberals make this mistake. You'll see the Daily Show's Jon Stewart, for example, the premise of his whole program, The Daily Show, is pointing out right-wing hypocrisy. But that's what liberals do. A leftist realizes that to a right-winger, privilege is not hypocrisy. To Braving Ruin, and to the alt-right, and to classical fascists everywhere, this is perfectly reasonable because of the Übermensch and the Undermensch. Because of their essentialist arguments, there are certain people who just are born to be slaves. There are people who are born to be underneath other people, and those people need to be policed in a very extreme sense, because they are equivalent. You know, it's more human subspeciation talking points about how the mud races, or whatever racist coding they're using, need to be placed under brutal authoritarian rule, the same way that you would try to domesticate or contain any other wild animal that you brought into your home. The home being the state, the society that they would want to create. So yeah, I mean, you got to remember that hypocrisy is not a thing to the extreme right. It's the way things are, the way things were, and the way that they think things should be again. They think that there should be two set of rules, and at least they admit it. My problem with the free speech centrists is that they don't admit that they're hypocrites. They don't own their hypocrisy. They don't just come out and say, I think that my free speech is more important than yours. I think that my right to a platform is more important than yours. They try to deflect it with a bunch of egalitarian centrifuge, you know, a bunch of mishy-mashy. You know, they appease you with mealy-mouth arguments for this is true equality. At least a proper fascist and a proper alt-righter will not bother to patronize you with the ideas of you know, that you know, he's the real egalitarian. A real fascist will at least admit that they want freedom for themselves and slavery for you.